Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really fascinating puzzle. It involves oxygen.
Right. We all need it,
Oh
obviously. It's
yeah.
vital for life, used in medicine.
Under pressure, like
Yeah.
in hyperbaric therapy or, deep scuba diving.
Exactly. That same essential oxygen can become toxic to your central nervous system. That's quite the paradox.
Yeah, it really is. So for this deep dive, we've been digging into some chapters from Hyperbaric Medicine Practice,
And specifically, one chapter that looks at a pretty surprising potential solution to this oxygen toxicity problem.
which is the ketogenic diet
Yeah,
and ketone supplements.
that's the one.
A diet? That
Mhm.
sounds kind of wild. So our mission today is to unpack how maybe changing your body's fuel source could act as a sort of shield against this CNS oxygen toxicity, or CNS OT.
Especially relevant for divers, yeah.
Thinking about all you listeners who explore underwater.
And, this is exactly a new issue, oxygen toxicity. Paul Bert, a French scientist, he first wrote about this way back in the late 1800s.
Oh, that long ago.
Yep. And he noted the main sign was seizures, brain effects. So it's been on the radar for a very long time.
And it's really about the partial pressure of oxygen, the PO2, right, when that gets high?
That's the key. Think about hyperbaric oxygen therapy, HbO2. Patients breathe 100% oxygen inside a pressurized chamber. That seriously cranks up the PO2 they're exposed to.
Okay.
And for you divers, when you go deep, even breathing regular air, the water pressure increases the partial pressure of the oxygen you inhale. Same if you use mixed gases.
Right, so more oxygen dissolves in your blood can be good medically, but also carries the CNS OT risk.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's get a clearer picture. The textbook lays it out. The higher the PO2 you breathe and the longer you're exposed,
The greater the risk of CNS OT and the worse it can be.
which is why there are strict limits. For diving depths, exposure times, same for hyperbaric treatment.
Definitely. Like the example given. Breathing pure oxygen at just 50 feet underwater. CNS OT could potentially kick in within like 10 minutes.
10 minutes, that's incredibly fast.
It is. And there are warning signs. Things people might notice before a major event happens.
What kind of signs are we talking about?
Things like your face getting pale, sweating more than usual, even getting hiccups, feeling nauseous, ringing in the ears, tinnitus.
Okay.
Visual changes too, like tunnel vision, lips twitching. Feeling really anxious can also be part of it.
And the chapter mentions some specific signs linked to seizures underwater, right?
Yes, that was interesting. That tinnitus, ringing ears, breathing really fast, hearing issues, feeling disoriented or confused, memory gaps, and that facial twitching again.
It's like your body's trying to send up a flare gun. Hey, problem here.
Sort of, yeah. And divers have actually reported noticing several of these things happening, sometimes quite a few, before losing consciousness from CNS OT.
So maybe there's a window there to recognize it.
Potentially, yes. That's the hope.
And it's somewhat, well, maybe reassuring is the wrong word, but the research suggests divers who do experience CNS OT usually recover okay, without lasting neurological damage.
Generally, yes. Which really underlines why prevention is just so critical. We want to avoid it happening in the first place.
Right.
And the sources say there actually haven't been a huge number of studies on actual CNS OT accidents in diving.
Which makes understanding the risks even more important, especially, it sounds like, for closed-circuit rebreather divers, CCRs.
Absolutely. CCRs let divers maintain very high, very constant PO2 levels, which is great for decompression, but it does mean they face a higher risk. Statistically, the fatality rate is higher compared to open-circuit scuba.
Okay, so we know high PO2 causes this, oxidative stress. It ramps up reactive oxygen and nitrogen species, R on S.
And that's thought to be a major driver behind CNS OT.
And kind of surprisingly, just eating more antioxidants like vitamin C or E hasn't really panned out as a reliable fix.
No, it seems not. Dietary antioxidants alone haven't proven very effective in mitigating CNS OT.
There are anti-seizure meds, but they have downsides for divers.
Big downsides. Drowsiness, fatigue, coordination issues. Not things you want underwater.
Definitely not.
And this is where it gets really interesting. This potential role for the ketogenic diet. A diet that's been used for like a century to treat kids with epilepsy that doesn't respond to drugs.
Okay, so how does that diet, designed for epilepsy, possibly connect to oxygen risk for divers? Let's get into how keto actually works.
Okay, so basically the ketogenic diet forces your body into a metabolic state called ketosis.
Ketosis, right.
This happens when your body doesn't have much glucose available. Usual fuel source is gone. So fasting does this, very low-calorie diets, very low-carb diets like keto, even prolonged intense exercise.
And when that happens, insulin levels drop.
And your liver starts breaking down fat into ketone bodies.
Those are the key players. Beta-hydroxybutyrate VHB, acetoacetate AHAC, and acetone.
Those are the main three, yes. BHB and AHAC are the primary ones used for energy.
So this state, ketosis, it's not just for epilepsy, it has broader effects.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look back historically. Using fasting to control seizures. That idea is ancient. Hippocrates mentioned it. Yeah. Then jump forward to the 1920s, Mayo Clinic. Researchers wanted to mimic the metabolic effects of fasting, but with food. And voila, the ketogenic diet was born. High fat, very low carb, moderate protein.
And it worked for seizures.
Amazingly well, yes. The chapter points out how effective it was, and still is, for drug-resistant epilepsy in both kids and adults.
How effective are we talking?
The numbers are pretty striking. On average, over half the patients see their seizures cut by more than 50%. Another third get over 90% improvement.
Wow.
And then you have these super responders, maybe 10-15%, who become completely seizure-free long-term, even after trying multiple drugs that failed.
That's genuinely incredible. So what's the magic? How does shifting the body's fuel source actually stop seizures, whether from epilepsy or potentially this oxygen toxicity?
Well, the exact mechanisms are still being fully worked out. It's complex.
Yeah.
But several key ideas have emerged. One of the strongest contenders is reducing oxidative stress.
Which we already said is a big factor in CNS OT.
And in epilepsy, too. The ketogenic diet seems to tackle oxidative stress in a few ways.
Okay, how? Down at the cellular level.
So research suggests when your cells burn ketones instead of glucose in their mitochondria, the powerhouses, it actually generates fewer harmful reactive oxygen species, like superoxide.
Okay. Less exhaust.
Kind of, yeah. And at the same time, ketone metabolism helps regenerate glutathione. That's a major antioxidant your brain uses, and it's often depleted in epilepsy. Studies show that KD boosts the ratio of good active glutathione to the used-up kind.
And that main ketone, HB, has another role.
It does. Beta-hydroxybutyrate acts as a signaling molecule, almost like a hormone. It can actually inhibit certain enzymes called histone deacetylases, or HDACs.
Okay.
Inhibiting HDACs basically flipped switches on your DNA, turning up the production of proteins that help your cells resist oxidative stress, like antioxidant enzymes. So it's a direct protective effect.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, what's mechanism number 2? Something about glucose.
Yes, glucose reduction. The ketogenic diet naturally leads to lower and, importantly, more stable blood glucose levels. There's less reliance on glucose metabolism in the brain, which itself can generate oxidative stress.
So it's not just about having ketones, it's also about having less glucose swing.
That seems to be part of it. We know if someone's seizures are well controlled on keto and then they suddenly eat a bunch of carbs.
The seizures can come right back.
Exactly. It can rapidly reverse the seizure control.
And the chapter mentioned drugs that block glucose use, like 2-DEG.
Right, 2-deoxyglucose. It mimics glucose but jams up the machinery. It's shown anti-seizure effects in lab models.
Yeah.
But there are toxicity concerns, especially at higher doses. So its practical use for preventing CNS OT might be limited.
Gotcha. Okay, third idea, brain energy. Seizures burn a ton of energy, right?
A huge amount. That intense electrical activity is very demanding. And there's evidence that this energy drain itself might contribute to epilepsy, keeping everything balanced, ion gradients, potentials. It all needs ATP, energy.
So how does keto help there?
It seems to boost the brain's overall energy reserves and also improve something called anaplerosis.
Anaplerosis. Okay, what's that?
Think of it like topping off the fuel tanks for the Krebs cycle, that central energy-producing pathway in your cells. Ketones provide alternative fuel and building blocks to replenish the cycle's intermediates. This keeps energy production humming and provides materials for making neurotransmitters too.
So more efficient energy production.
And better maintenance of the energy cycle, yes. The KD has been shown to upregulate enzymes in that cycle. Plus, it helps mitochondria, the powerhouses themselves.
How so?
Mitochondrial dysfunction is often seen in epilepsy. The KD seems to support them, influence gene expression related to mitochondria, improve their efficiency, even increase the number of certain mitochondrial proteins.
Okay, fourth mechanism. Neurotransmitters, brain chemicals. It sounds complicated.
It is a bit.
Yeah.
But the key players in seizures are often glutamate, which is excitatory, it ramps things up, and GABA, which is inhibitory, it calms things down.
And CNS OT involves too much excitation.
Yes, often an imbalance leaning towards too much glutamate activity. Nutritional ketosis generally seems to shift that balance back towards GABA, the calming influence.
How does it manage that?
A few potential ways. It might increase the activity of the enzyme GG, which makes GABA. Also, brain cells called astrocytes seem to convert more glutamate into glutamine during ketosis, and glutamine can then be used to make GABA.
Interesting.
And acetoacetate, the other main ketone, might directly reduce the release of glutamate from nerve endings.
But the chapter says it's not totally straightforward. Studies vary.
That's true. Measuring GABA and glutamate levels in people on the diet has given mixed results. It likely depends on the specific condition, the brain region, maybe even the individual. Another molecule possibly involved is adenosine.
Adenosine.
Yeah, it's generally inhibitory in the brain. Some research suggests that KD's anti-seizure effects might work partly through boosting adenosine signaling, specifically via A1 receptors.
Okay, and the last idea mentioned, it can affect the electrical properties of the nerve cells themselves.
Correct. How easily a neuron fires is linked to its energy state. There are these channels in the cell membrane called ATP-sensitive potassium channels, KATP channels.
KATP.
Okay. They link the cell's energy level, ATP, to its electrical excitability. When ATP is low, these channels open, letting potassium ions flow out, which makes the neuron less likely to fire. It's a protective mechanism.
And ketones influence these channels.
Yes, particularly SDOB. It seems ketones can affect both the number of these channels and how active they are. The thinking is that the shift away from glucose metabolism might cause subtle local drops in ATP near the membrane, activating these KATP channels more, leading to hypopolarization, a more stable, less excitable state.
Wow, okay. That's a lot of potential ways keto could work against seizures.
Yeah.
So bringing it back to oxygen toxicity, what's the actual evidence it helps with CNS OT, specifically for divers or in hyperbaric settings?
Yeah, this is where the research is much newer, more limited, but definitely encouraging. The chapter notes one study finding that just being in fasting ketosis reduced CNS OT effects.
Okay, fasting helps. What about ketones directly?
The key study involved rats exposed to really high oxygen pressure. 5 atmospheres absolute, 5 ATA, pure oxygen, very high stress.
And what happened?
They gave one group of rats a special ketone supplement, a ketone diester. This stuff rapidly elevates both GHB and ACAC in the blood.
And the result?
It was dramatic. The rats given the ketone diester took 575% longer to have a seizure compared to the control rats.
575% longer. That's huge.
It's a massive protective effect in that model, yes. Really significant.
And it seemed like the mix of ketones mattered, not just butHB.
That's what it looked like. They tested another compound, 143-butadiol, which mostly just raises butadiol. It didn't offer the same protection.
Interesting.
Yeah, it strongly suggests that having AAC present, or maybe even acetone, which comes from ACAC, is important for this specific protection against CNS OT.
The chapter also mentions ongoing work combining lower doses of that ester with MCTs, medium-chain triglycerides.
Yes. Those studies, also in rats, are showing positive results to increase time before seizure. MCTs themselves can be mildly ketogenic and might slow the absorption of the ester, giving a more sustained effect.
What about just taking BHB supplements like ketone salts along with MCTs?
They tested that too. And interestingly, that combination didn't significantly delay the CNS OT seizures.
Okay, so that really reinforces the idea that you need both BHB and ATAC, kind of like what you get naturally from fasting or a proper keto diet.
That seems to be the strong implication from the animal data so far. Having that mix seems key for this particular benefit.
So summing up the evidence, early days, mainly animal models for CNS OT specifically, but the results are really pointing towards nutritional ketosis diet or supplements as a potentially effective way to reduce this risk.
That's definitely the direction the research is pointing, yes. Very promising.
Okay, scientifically promising.
Yeah.
But let's talk practicalities. Is it actually safe? Is it feasible for divers, people with active lifestyles, to adopt a ketogenic diet?
That's a super important question. First off, it's worth remembering ketosis isn't some weird artificial state. It's a normal physiological adaptation.
How so?
Well, think about human evolution. Our ancestors definitely went through periods where food was scarce. Our bodies evolved the ability to switch fuel sources, to burn fat and produce ketones to survive those times.
And the brain runs well on ketones.
Extremely well. During prolonged fasting, once glycogen is gone, the brain can get up to maybe 2/3 of its energy from ketones. It's crucial for preserving cognitive function when you haven't eaten.
So it's a survival mechanism.
Absolutely. And think about breastfed babies. They're often in mild ketosis because breast milk is rich in fats, including MCTs. So it's considered safe even during critical brain development.
Okay, but what about potential downsides? Long-term keto diets. We hear about side effects, right?
Yes, the classical, very strict ketogenic diet can have some side effects, but they're generally manageable. You need to be mindful of potential vitamin or mineral deficiencies, so good planning or supplementation is key. There can be a slightly increased risk of kidney stones for some people, often linked to changes in urine pH, but that can usually be managed with things like potassium citrate. Sometimes people see temporary changes in their blood lipid profiles, though often they improve long term. And for growing children on very strict versions, bone health needs monitoring.
But manageable with care and monitoring.
Generally, yes,
Yeah.
with proper medical supervision, especially when starting out.
Are there people who absolutely should not do a keto diet?
Yes, definitely. There are specific, though rare, metabolic disorders involving fat metabolism, like carnitine deficiencies or fatty acid oxidation defects. Those are absolute contraindications. And relative ones might include pre-existing severe kidney or liver disease.
Mm.
Always best to check with a doctor.
Okay. What about just living keto? Is it hard to stick to?
It can be, no doubt,
Mm-hmm.
especially the very traditional high-fat versions used therapeutically,
Yeah.
but it's gotten much easier.
How so?
Public interest has exploded. So there are tons more resources online, cookbooks, support groups. Plus, the food industry has caught on lots of keto-friendly products, low-carb breads, pastas, snacks, even pre-made meal services.
And there are less strict versions, too.
Right. Things like the modified Atkins diet, MAD, the low glycemic index treatment, LGIT,
Mm.
the MCT oil diet. These are often easier to follow and still show good results for epilepsy control. Whether they offer the same level of protection against CNS OT, that hasn't been tested specifically yet.
Okay. And then there are the supplements, exogenous ketones, taking ketones directly.
Yeah, things like ketone esters or ketone salts, they offer a shortcut, basically.
Yeah.
You can raise your blood ketone levels significantly within minutes to an hour without needing weeks of strict dieting.
And they seem to mimic many of the metabolic effects.
They do. Lower blood glucose, reduced oxidative stress markers, anti-inflammatory effects, a lot of the same downstream benefits seem to occur.
And those ketone esters had that dramatic effect in the rat CNS OT study we talked about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very encouraging early results. And these supplements have shown promise in other seizure models too. Plus, importantly, there's a study showing that divers can safely dive while in diet-induced ketosis.
Oh, interesting. Human divers.
Yes, and they could achieve ketosis pretty quickly, less than 48 hours. And there's ongoing research right now looking at nutritional ketosis in rebreather divers. And so far, no negative side effects have been reported.
Okay, so it seems feasible, potentially safe with care. Now, let's think beyond just preventing the bad stuff, the toxicity. Does the chapter suggest any other advantages for divers being in ketosis?
It does. Several potentially quite interesting ones. One is enhanced oxygen efficiency.
Using oxygen better. How does that work?
Well, it goes back quite a way. Henry Lardy in the 40s noticed ketones help sperm motility with less oxygen. Then Richard Veitch's lab showed that giving ketones to working rat hearts allowed them to produce more pumping power for the same amount of oxygen consumed.
More bang for your oxygen buck, basically.
Well, essentially, yes. The biochemistry suggests that burning ketones changes the redox state in the mitochondria, tweaking the electron transport chain so you get more ATP energy per molecule of oxygen used.
And this has been seen in humans.
There are studies, yeah. In people fasting who are in ketosis, they observed decreased overall cerebral blood flow and reduced oxygen consumption by the brain, while cognitive function remained fine.
Wow. So for a diver, maybe in a cold or stressful environment, using oxygen more efficiently could be a real plus. Could it even help with nitrogen narcosis?
That's a fascinating thought. The idea that better brain energy efficiency might counteract some of the narcotic effects of nitrogen at depth. It's speculative, but plausible. Definitely an area ripe for more research.
Okay, what else? Reduced anxiety.
Yeah, that's another potential benefit mentioned. Anxiety is common, right? And it can certainly affect divers.
For sure. Pre-dive jitters, or even during a dive if something unexpected happens.
Exactly. The brain areas involved in anxiety amygdala, hippocampus overlap with those involved in epilepsy. And ketosis seems to help rebalance neurotransmitters, maybe promoting more calming GABAergic tone.
Is there evidence for this?
Anecdotally, many people on keto report feeling calmer, less anxious. And animal studies back this up. Giving rodents ketone supplements reduces anxiety-like behaviors in standard tests. So, may be helpful for HBO patients feeling anxious in the chamber, or for divers.
Interesting. And then there's this idea of general neuroprotection, like making the brain tougher against stress.
Yes, ketosis seems to have broad protective effects in many neurological conditions linked to metabolic problems or oxidative stress.
How? What are the mechanisms there?
It's likely a combination. Preserving energy reserves, like we talked about,
Mhm.
reducing that glutamate excitotoxicity, fighting oxidative stress and inflammation. Remember, KDSB is a more efficient fuel than glucose, energetically.
Right.
And ketosis stimulates mitochondrial biogenesis, making more mitochondria. Plus, ACAC itself has shown protective effects against glutamate damage in cell cultures.
So the idea is if you're in ketosis, your brain might be more resilient if it does encounter the stress of high PO2, less likely to seize or maybe recover better.
That's the hypothesis.
Yeah.
And think about the risks after a potential seizure, underwater disorientation, risk of rapid ascent, DCI. If ketosis reduces the incidence of the initial seizure, it could indirectly reduce those downstream risks too.
And protect against damage from the high oxygen itself or even from DCI.
Potentially.
Yeah.
There's even some very early preliminary work suggesting BHB might promote nerve cell regeneration. Could be relevant for any CNS injury, whether from DCI or a seizure event.
Okay, and finally, enhanced performance, both physical and mental.
Yeah, this is a really hot area of research right now. We see benefits of ketosis in neurological disorders, but there's growing evidence it might enhance function even in healthy brains.
Also,
Well, things that challenge our metabolism, like exercise or intermittent fasting, are known to be good for the brain. Ketones seem to be key signaling molecules in these benefits. For example, BHB stimulates BDNF.
brain-derived neurotrophic factor, important for learning, memory, growing new brain cells.
Exactly. So ketones might directly boost cognitive processes. It makes evolutionary sense. You'd want to be sharp mentally when you're searching for food during scarcity.
And physical performance.
The oxygen efficiency could play a role in endurance. Ketosis also helps preserve muscle mass. It's anti-catabolic. And some recent work suggests ACAC might speed up muscle repair after injury.
What about fuel use during exercise?
That's key for endurance athletes. Becoming fat-adapted allows athletes to tap into their huge body fat reserves more effectively, sparing precious glycogen stores. This could prevent bonking or hitting the wall.
So, lots of potential benefits beyond just the CNS OT protection. Improved brain blood flow, less oxidative stress, better insulin sensitivity. Sounds like a good package for anyone in demanding situations.
It really does seem to offer a suite of potential metabolic advantages.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. It really seems like nutritional ketosis, whether through diet or maybe supplements, presents this really compelling, multi-pronged approach for divers.
Yeah, the potential is there to decrease the chances of those oxygen toxicity seizures, possibly enhance neurological and physical performance, and maybe even offer broader protection against environmental stresses underwater.
And this isn't just for the super technical divers on rebreathers, right?
No, the principles could potentially apply across the board. Recreational divers breathing air at a moderate depths experience increased PO2. People doing shallow dives on pure oxygen, like for some types of work or certain military applications, they face CNS OT risks too.
It's truly fascinating stuff. Which leaves us with a final thought. Given these really intriguing findings about metabolic flexibility and resilience, what other extreme environments or maybe other demanding professions might stand to benefit from tapping into the advantages of ketosis?
That's a great question to ponder.
Definitely something for you to think about. Thanks for joining us on the Depth Dive today.